And I was building one of these things. I wasn't aware of what I was building. I was trying to build a shielded loop antenna to use for VLF and ELF, because in this area VLF is useless on a long wire antenna, which is what's usually used. Is what you pick up is loco 60 hertz background. So I was trying to probe into the magnetic fields, not the electric fields. I was building a shielded magnetic loop to hook up to my ELF receiver here. And I considered the cheapest, easiest way for me to build this antenna. Somehow, I came up with the Delta T design. Because the Delta T design is a shielded loop. And I built the thing on the roof because I wanted to listen to VLF and ELF. And I noticed I had like 40 turns in each winding. Each loop had 40 turns. I had to sit there with an ohm meter and actually buzz them out to find which wire here goes to the wire here. And I had to hold the wires, to put the probes, the ohm meter on them. And then I solder it to the terminal board. Each time I find a loop, I solder it. I found I can only do this for about 20 minutes, and then I feel very fatigued, very tired, floating, funny. And, so I'd only do it for 20 minutes at a time. One day, I had a storm, a nice big storm coming up on the horizon. I had the relay canister open. So I wanted to finish that relay canister, seal it up with the gook and putty and such before the storm came. So I pushed myself. After about an hour, I got to feel so weird. I just passed out. When I woke up, when it was raining, because first thing I thought, oh my God, it's raining. So I had to throw some plastic tarp over the relays. And I was sitting there realizing I started to have scenes of Montauk flashing through my mind. I then, for the next couple of nights, dreamed of Montauk heavily, except I was there. Up to that point, I never believed I was there. Now, I thought back, remembered how many people were there, remembered me. I have guys walk up to me, hey, what have you been doing, blah, blah, blah. And I say, do I know you? They say, sure, we've met. I say, where do I know you from? I work with you out of Montauk. You work with me at Montauk. All of a sudden, he clammed up. When he realized I didn't remember it, he realized he didn't know. Because some of the military people, they knew some of us were on their oath and were fully conscious, some of us weren't. My cousin married a guy that was stationed out there. He swore he remembered me. And the family thought he was cracked. So, little by little, over a couple of months, I pulled back my memories.
So you were a part of the second part of the project,
and the first.
How did you get involved initially into that? You were part of the first.
Yeah, in the what's called the psychic signature, or the Matthews function, which is a particular sense of frequency individual to the person as a thumbprint. Everyone has a particular signature. What I'm kind of have been struggling with is which typically came first. If you follow the chronology of time, obviously the 40s prior to the 80s. That doesn't mean that actually was the case. Some of the information that I get from reading, I've been trained esoterically, initially by the NSA in the 70s, to be able to project my own sense of essence to a particular point and make a reference, and then feedback certain information. Some of my readings inside, in other words, in adjustment with myself into different esoteric zones, something like the Akashic on the esoteric zone, which is something that is that most people use for long-term memory. And there are more different zones, elaborate, evolved, and such. And some of the information comes back that the part of my recall in the 40s is because it has not fully happened to me yet, which I wonder as to why and what that actually means. But if you follow the chronology sake, obviously the 40s prior to the 80s, as to how this whole phenomenon occurred regarding me, that's a good question. Don't really know per se. other than that I was volunteered by my father. This is back in basically 1939. Of course, there's a difference in age here. I'm 41 as I sit, and it's a physical impossibility to be X amount of years back in the 40s and still be 40 years of age. That's a different story having to do with actually transplanting the soul into a different body per se, without going through the typical incarnate process that in metaphysics that's a standard phenomenon occurs.
So you're not in the same vessel you were born in?
That's correct.
Okay.
The original vessel is 1917 in Germany. Al was born in 1918 or 16.
Something like that.
Something, I forget whatever time that was. Yeah, we were volunteered. For reasons.
Was your father in the service?
He was in the Navy for a number of years. Was in and out of the Navy and Coast Guard. Auxiliary Coast Guard. And Al has a picture of him which I question. Mostly I question because I don't recall. I'm not saying it's not valid. Just my own recall, I don't have a connection with this picture that he is training the crew of the Eldridge up in Groton, Connecticut, I think it is. Somewhere up in there.
Coast Guard Academy.
Oh, yes?
But that is in with your father's photographs.
Sure. So it could very well be valid, I just don't recall it myself. He's another kind of interesting story in the sense that he was connected almost worldwide for reasons not really known, other than that he grew up in money, and there was money in the family to do sort of as he pleased. Getting back a little bit to the Philadelphia process, some of my information comes through trance, and it's part of the mind which I'm told that will not lie, whatever that means. This is according to psychological and the psychologists and the psychiatrists' form of identification. Under trance, I came up with something or had access to information saying that during this Philadelphia process there were 3 UFOs that I saw in my sighting in looking up in my esoteric view of things that were around the area at the time. And one of them was actually pulled in as this whole phenomenon of energy started to move and ended up in what typically was a vortex pattern, a swirling type of energetic
like a black
cone. Yeah, it could be. Black holes is somewhat a little different, but it's that sense of. And actually got pulled in and ended up in Montauk. And through the number of years it actually did evolve and basically started to appear in its infancy. What did we figure? Early 50s or something like that.
I thought it was 60s.
Early 50s. Okay, well, between early 50s and early 60s. And then started to materialize. And of course, there's some interest and speculation saying that this is partially why that the base was of interest, and all these buildings were built around it and such, and that through the years it actually came to fruition. And so that's part of Al Bielek's, who Al co-authored a book with Rod Steiger?
Brad Steiger.
Rod Steiger.
Brad, yeah.
Brad Steiger, sure. That's one of his considerations, as indeed this whole process of opening this hole in space-time was contrived, and it was E.T. Considered, and this is what they directed the scientists to come up with this drop-dead date of August 12th, 1943, to have this experimentation, and it had to be fired up and done at this particular time.